The emergency alarm screamed through the massive halls of Proxima Station. Council leader Vexera felt her heart racing as she watched the holographic message play again and again. The blue light from the display cast eerie shadows across her worried face. On the screen, a Zephyrian woman was crying. Her normally beautiful blue skin looked pale and dirty. Behind her, smoke rose from burning buildings. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the transmission. "Please, anyone who can hear this," she whispered, her voice shaking with fear. "My name is Zerilyn. I'm sending this from Colony Base 7 on Kepler 44-B. We're dying here. They came from the deep caves 3 days ago. The Vorthok are awake." The woman looked over her shoulder as something roared in the distance. When she turned back, tears were streaming down her face. 12 million people lived here last week. Now we're maybe 4 million. They're hunting us like animals. Our weapons can't even scratch them. Our ships can't escape fast enough. They're everywhere. Her voice broke completely. "If there's anyone out there, please help us. We don't have much time left." The message ended with static. The chamber fell silent except for the nervous breathing of 47 different alien species. Some had tentacles that writhed with anxiety. Others had fur that stood on end. A few were changing colors rapidly, which meant they were terrified. Council. Leader Thexara had lived for 300 years. She had seen wars, plagues, and natural disasters, but she had never seen anything like this. Vorthok weren't supposed to exist anymore. They were bedtime stories parents told to scare their children. "Are we certain this is real?" asked Representative Morkin, his voice barely a whisper. He was from a species that looked like giant insects, and his wings were trembling. "Our long-range sensors confirm it," replied the station's AI. "Multiple large life forms are moving. Across the planet's surface, colony cities are going dark one by one. The heat signatures match historical records of Vorthok activity." General Kexaval of the Altarian Defense Corps stood up slowly. He was a proud warrior from a species that had never lost a battle, but even he looked scared. "My friends," he said, his voice heavy with defeat, "I must be honest with you. Our peacekeeping forces are designed to stop riots and small conflicts. We have never faced anything like this. These creatures are older than our civilizations. They have been sleeping in the deep places for millions of years, waiting. But surely we can do something," pleaded Representative Yelanara from the Crystalline Collective. "We have energy weapons, force fields, battle cruisers." General Kexavel shook his head sadly. "The historical records are clear. The Vorthok have natural armor that can resist our strongest weapons. They are intelligent pack hunters. They can sense fear and use it against their prey. Every time our ancestors fought them, entire fleets were destroyed." The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Some representatives were already calling for evacuation of nearby systems. Others wanted to build defensive barriers. A few were discussing surrender terms. In the corner of the chamber, a small figure raised one thin arm. Councilmember Veltar was barely 4 feet tall, with large black eyes and gray skin. The species considered his people to be cowards because they avoided conflict. But Veltar had spent his life studying military history. "There is one possibility," he said quietly. The chamber slowly fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. "One species that might be able to fight these creatures? Who?" demanded Vexera. Veltar's large eyes seemed to grow even bigger. "The humans." The reaction was immediate and violent. Half the representatives started shouting at once. The other half looked like they wanted to run away. The word humans was spoken in the Galactic Council like a curse word. "Are you insane?" roared General Kexavel. "We quarantined that entire solar system for good reason. Those creatures are barely civilized. They come from a world so dangerous that visiting it requires full environmental protection. They fight wars for entertainment," added Representative Morkin. "They have weapons designed specifically to kill their own species. They're completely mad." Veltar waited for the shouting to die down. "Yes," he said simply. "And that's exactly why they might succeed where we would fail. The Vorthok have never encountered a species that treats violence as a natural part of life." The argument went on for 6 straight hours. Council leader Thexera watched as her carefully organized meeting turned into chaos. Representatives were shouting at each other in dozens of different languages. Some had walked out completely. Others were demanding immediate evacuation of the entire sector. Representative? Morkan slammed his insect-like fist on his desk. You all forgotten why we built the quarantine zone around Earth? These humans are savages. They have something called nuclear weapons that can destroy entire planets. They use them against each other. Not just nuclear weapons, added Representative Yelenara, her crystalline body flickering with nervous energy. Our scouts reported they have something called biological warfare. They create diseases specifically to kill other humans. What kind of species does that? General Kexaval nodded grimly. The intelligence reports are disturbing. They have over 200 different ways to kill each other. They study war like we study art. Their children play games about fighting. Their entertainment involves watching others get hurt. But Velta stood his ground. His small frame looked fragile next to the larger representatives, but his voice was steady. Yes, they're violent. Think about where they come from. Earth isn't just a dangerous world. It's the most dangerous world we've ever discovered. Activated a holographic display showing Earth's surface. The other representatives gasped as they saw the planet's conditions. Massive storms that could destroy cities. Earthquakes that split continents. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun. Oceans, full of creatures with dozens of teeth. Look at this, Beltar continued. Their world has tried to kill them every single day for millions of years. They didn't just survive. They became the dominant species. They turned a Deathworld into their home. That's exactly why we can't trust them, interrupted Representative. Zexalon from the Peaceful Collective, they're too dangerous. What if they decide we're their next enemy? The debate continued as emergency reports kept coming in from Kepler-4 for 2b. Each update was worse than the last. The Vorthok were moving faster now, consuming entire settlements in hours instead of days. The few survivors were hiding in underground bunkers, but even those weren't safe. 3 million people are still alive, reported the station's AI. But that number is dropping rapidly. At current rates, the colony will be completely consumed within 72 hours. Council leader Thexara felt the weight of 12 million lives on her shoulders. She had been elected to keep the galaxy safe, but now she was facing an impossible choice. Risk contacting the most dangerous species in known space, or watch an entire world die. We need to vote, she announced. All in favor of contacting the humans? The chamber fell silent. One by one, representatives raised their hands, arms, tentacles, or whatever they used to signal agreement. Thexera counted carefully. The room was almost perfectly split. 24 in favor, she announced. 23 against. The motion passes. Representative Morkan stood up angrily. You're all making a terrible mistake. The humans won't just save that colony. They'll see how weak we are. They'll realize they can take whatever they want from us. Maybe, admitted Veltar quietly. But if we do nothing, the Vorthok will spread to other worlds. How many colonies are you willing to sacrifice to avoid asking for help? Within an hour, the message was prepared. It was simple and direct, the kind of communication that even primitive species could understand. The transmission was sent to Ward, the Sol system at maximum speed. Carrying the desperate hopes of 47 civilizations, the message read, Emergency. Ancient predators have awakened. Peaceful colony under attack. 12 million lives at risk.
Oh.
Require immediate military assistance. Coordinates attached. Please respond. The council members went to their quarters to wait for a response. Expected silence. A few thought they might get a small scouting party. Some worried about what would happen if the humans actually came. None of them imagined what was already happening in the Sol system. The moment that transmission reached Earth, something had awakened that the galaxy had never seen before. The sleeping giant was stirring, and when it fully woke up, the universe would never be the same. The message from space arrived at Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station at exactly 14:32 GMT on a Tuesday. Within 3 minutes, every major military command on the planet had received a copy. Within 10 minutes, The president of the United Earth Federation was reading it in the Oval Office. Within 20 minutes, Admiral Park Jin-woo was standing in the Pentagon's war room, staring at a holographic display of the galaxy. "So let me understand this correctly," Park said, his weathered face showing no emotion. "Aliens are asking us for help?" "Yes, sir," replied General Kim Tae-ho, the Secretary of Defense. "The same aliens who put us in quarantine 50 years ago. The same ones who told us we were too violent to join their galactic community." Park almost smiled. Almost. "And now they need our violence to save them." The room fell silent as everyone processed the irony. For decades, humanity had been treated like dangerous children. Their ships were forbidden from leaving the solar system. Their communications were monitored. Their technology was considered primitive and brutal. "What do we know about these Vorthok creatures?" Park asked. Dr. Yang Min-young, the military's top xenobiologist, stepped forward. "Based on the alien transmission, they're apex predators. Ancient, intelligent, and nearly indestructible. They've been sleeping in deep caves for millions of years." "How big are we talking?" "The size of city blocks, sir. Multiple heads, armored. Skin, pack hunters. They consume entire ecosystems before going back to sleep." Park nodded slowly. "And the aliens can't stop them?" "Their weapons are designed for peacekeeping, not warfare. They haven't fought a real war in thousands of years. They don't understand how to kill something that wants to kill them." "But we do," Park said quietly. General Kim stepped forward. "Sir, if we're going to respond, we need to move fast. The alien colony has maybe 72 hours before they're all dead." Park walked to the window and looked out at the bustling city below. Millions of humans going about their daily lives, unaware that their species was about to take its first real step into the galaxy. But not as diplomats or explorers, as soldiers. "How many ships can we deploy?" he asked. 12 full battle fleets." "Sir, that's 480 vessels total. Every ship we have that's combat ready." Park turned back to face the room. "And weapons?" "Everything, sir. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, antimatter warheads. We've got things the aliens have never seen before." Good Park's voice was cold as ice. "Because if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Send orders to all fleet commanders. Full mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every marine we have." "Sir," interrupted Admiral Choi Hai-won, "shouldn't we start with just a few ships? Test the waters?" Park looked at her like she had suggested, surrendering. "Admiral, for 50 years we've been told we're too violent for the galaxy. Now the galaxy is asking us to be violent on their behalf. We don't do half measures." Within 6 hours, the largest military fleet in human history was assembling in space around Earth. The UES Indomitable, Park's flagship, was a massive dreadnought, designed for one purpose: destroying anything that threatened humanity. Around it, 11 other battle fleets moved into formation. Captain Lee Soo-jin stood at the communications station, watching the displays light up with status reports. Every ship was loaded with weapons that had never been tested in real combat. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war that might never come were finally getting their chance. "Sir," she reported, "all fleets are in position. 480 ships ready for jump." Park looked out at the assembled armada. Each vessel was a testament to human ingenuity and human violence. They had been built in secret, hidden, from alien sensors, designed to fight enemies that humanity had never met. "Open a channel to all ships," Park ordered. The comm system crackled to life.
At.
"This is Admiral Park Jin-woo, to all fleet commanders.
At.
Today, humanity leaves the solar system for the first time in 50 years. We're not going as explorers or diplomats. We're going as soldiers. There are innocent people dying, and we're going to save them." He paused, looking at the stars that humanity had been forbidden to visit. "The aliens think they know what humans are capable of. They're wrong. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten innocent life in front of Deathworlders. All ships, jump on my command." The countdown began. 10 seconds. 5, 3, 2, 1. Jump. In an instant, nearly 500 human warships vanished from Earth's orbit, leaving only empty space and the promise of violence delivered to those who deserved it most. The jump from hyperspace always made Admiral Park's stomach turn. But this time was different. As the stars stopped streaking and settled into their normal patterns, he found himself staring at a sight that would haunt him forever. Kepler-44 to be hung before them like a wounded animal. What should have been a beautiful blue-green world was now covered in massive scars. Dark smoke rose from dozens of locations across the planet's surface. From space, Park could see entire sections of continents that looked like they had been scraped clean. "Sweet Jesus," whispered Lieutenant Kim. Minho, at the sensor station. His face had gone completely pale as he read the displays. "Admiral, the readings they're impossible," Park ordered, though his voice sounded strange even to himself. "Sir, when we last had contact with this colony, population was listed at 12 million souls. Current life sign readings show, ... double quotes, Kim paused, double-checking his instruments, 4.2 million, and falling. Sujin felt her hands shaking as she worked her controls. "Sir, we're picking up massive movement on the surface. Whatever's down there, it's big. Really big." Dr. Choi Hae-young, the fleet's lead scientist, was staring at her screens with the fascination of someone watching a car accident. "Admiral, I'm detecting at least 47 separate large organisms moving across the planet. Each one is registering as approximately 100 meters in length." Park felt his blood run cold. 100 meters. "That's the size of a city block, sir," Kim finished quietly. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the planet's surface in high definition. What they saw made even the hardened soldiers on the bridge gasp in shock. Moving across what had once been a thriving metropolitan area was something out of humanity's worst nightmares. The Vorthok was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Its 6 legs, each as thick as a subway train, moved with surprising grace. Across the rubble, 3 heads on long necks swiveled constantly, scanning for threats or prey. Its skin looked like black armor, covered in ridges and spikes that seemed to shift and move on their own. But it was what the creature was doing that made. Park's jaw clenched with rage. The Vorthok was feeding, not just eating, but systematically, consuming everything in its path. Buildings, vehicles, vegetation, and yes, people. It would lower one of its heads to the ground and simply inhale, sucking up everything within a 50-meter radius. "My God," Dr. Choi breathed, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "It's beautiful in its own way. Perfect predator. Millions of years of evolution have created something that can consume entire ecosystems. Beautiful." Lieutenant Kim looked at her like she had lost her mind. That thing just ate what used to be a school. Park watched in silence as the creature moved to the next block. Its movements were patient, methodical. It wasn't just feeding. Randomly, it was hunting systematically, making sure nothing escaped. "Admiral," Captain Lee reported, "we're receiving weak transmissions from the planet. Survivors are hiding in underground bunkers, but they're scattered across the continent. The Vorthok are hunting them down one by one." "How long do they have?" Park asked. "At current consumption rates, it's maybe 18 hours before the creatures find and consume all remaining survivors." Park felt something cold settle in his chest. He had seen war before. He had seen death and destruction. But this was different. This was watching intelligent life being consumed by something that treated sentient beings like snacks. "Sir," came a voice from the communications station. "We're being hailed by the surviving colonists. They're asking if we're the rescue fleet." Park looked at the view screen where another Vorthok had appeared, this one even larger than the first. It was methodically working its way through what had once been a residential district. Each building disappeared into its massive maw like candy. "Tell them yes," Park said quietly. "Tell them the humans are here." He turned to face his crew. Every face showed the same mix of horror and determination. They had come here to fight monsters, but seeing the reality of what these creatures could do had changed something fundamental in each of them. "All ships," Park announced over the fleet communication system, "you can see what we're dealing with. These things have killed 8 million people in 3 days. They're not just predators. They're genocide made flesh." He paused, watching another. Section of the city disappear down a Vorthok's throat. Target all weapons on the largest concentration of creatures. Maximum firepower. We're going to show these ancient monsters what happens when they threaten innocent life in front of humans. The fleet began to move into attack position. Nearly 500 human warships, each one designed to bring death to humanity's enemies, prepared to introduce the galaxy to the true meaning of violence. The orbital bombardment began at exactly 900 hours ship time. Admiral Park watched from the bridge as streams of plasma fire rained down on the planet's surface like deadly lightning. The first Vorthok to be hit let out a sound that could be heard even through the vacuum of space, a shriek of pain and confusion that sent chills down every human spine. Direct hits on targets 7 through 12, reported Captain Lee Sujin. The creatures they're moving differently now. They look confused. Park nodded grimly. For millions of years, nothing had challenged these monsters. They had been the ultimate predators, the apex of their food chain. But they had never encountered anything like human military doctrine. "Sir," came a voice from the communications station. "Major Song Taemin requests permission to begin ground assault." Park looked at the tactical display. The orbital bombardment had wounded several Vorthok, but their thick armor was protecting them from the worst damage. To finish this job, they needed boots on the ground. Permission granted. "Tell the Major to show these things what real predators look like." Down in the launch bay, Major Song Taemin stood before 200 of humanity's finest soldiers. Each Marine was wearing advanced combat armor and carrying weapons that had been designed specifically to kill, not just to wound or disable, to kill completely and efficiently. "Listen up," Song announced, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had spent his life learning how to wage war. "We're about to drop into hell itself. These creatures have been hunting since before our ancestors discovered fire. They think they're the deadliest things in the universe." He paused, looking at each face in the room. These weren't just soldiers. They were the children of Earth, forged by the most violent planet in known space. "They're wrong," Song continued. "We come from a world that has tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We didn't just survive, we conquered it. We turned a death world into our home. And now we're going to show these ancient monsters what happens when prey evolves into predators." The dropships launched from the fleet like missiles, screaming through the atmosphere toward the planet's surface. Inside each ship, Marines checked their weapons one final time. Plasma rifles, quantum grenades, molecular disruptors, tools of war that would have horrified the peaceful aliens who had asked for help. The first landing zone was a city park where a massive Vorthok was feeding on the remains of a playground. The creature was over 100 meters long, its 3 heads moving constantly as it consumed everything in sight. It had been hunting for 3 million years without ever experiencing fear. That was about to change. The dropships landed in a perfect circle around the beast. Before it could react, 200 human Marines poured out like a flood of death. Their weapons opened fire simultaneously, filling the air with streams of superheated plasma. The Vorthok's first reaction was curiosity. Nothing had ever attacked it before. Its middle head turned toward the strange new creatures, almost as if it was trying to understand what was happening. Then the plasma rounds hit its armored hide, and the creature experienced something completely new: pain. Real, serious, life-threatening pain. The sound it made was like nothing any human had ever heard. It was the scream of a predator that had suddenly realized it could become prey. "Spread out," Song shouted over the comm system. "Don't let it focus on any one group. Keep moving and keep firing." The Vorthok tried to charge, but the Marines were already moving. They scattered like leaves in the wind, each squad taking a different position. The creature found itself surrounded by enemies that moved faster than anything it had ever hunted. "Trying to use its fear projection," reported Sergeant Han Baram from the eastern flank. "The psychic attacks aren't working on us." Song almost smiled. The Vorthok had always relied on fear to paralyze their prey. But humans had been living with fear their entire existence. They had learned to fight through it, to use it, to make it their weapon. "That's because we're not prey," Song replied. "We're hunters, and right now we're hunting the biggest game in the galaxy." The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the Vorthok lay dead in the middle of the park, its massive body riddled with wounds that had torn through armor that had protected it for millions of years. Around its corpse, 200 human marines stood ready for the next target. For the first time in their existence, the other Vorthok across the planet felt something they had never experienced: fear. Their pack brother was dead, killed by creatures smaller than a single one of their heads. And those creatures were coming. For them next, the age of the Vorthok, as apex predators, was over. The age of human warfare had begun. Dr. Choi Hae-young had seen a lot of disturbing things in her career as a xenobiologist. But nothing had prepared her for what she discovered about the Vorthok. 3 days into the ground campaign she was examining the remains of the first creature they had killed when she made a discovery that changed everything. "Admiral," she called over the comm system, her voice shaking. "You need to see this immediately." Park found her in the makeshift laboratory she had set up in the ruins of what used to be a shopping mall. Around her were scattered pieces of Vorthok. Anatomy, thick armor plates, neural tissue, and something that looked like crystalline structures. "What did you find, Doctor?" Park asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Choi held up a piece of what looked like organic technology. "These aren't just animals, Admiral. Look at this. It's a communication device. It's biological, but definitely artificial. These creatures have been coordinating their attacks across the entire planet." Park felt his blood run cold. Coordinating how? They're sharing information. Hunting strategies, weak points in the colony's defenses, even the locations of survivors. "Admiral, they've been doing this for millions of years. They wake up, study their prey, develop the perfect hunting strategy, and then systematically consume everything." She activated a holographic display showing the planet's surface. Red dots marked where Vorthok had been active over the past week. The pattern was unmistakable. They had been working together, driving survivors toward specific locations where they could be consumed more efficiently. "They're not just predators," Choi continued, her voice filled with a mixture of fascination and horror. "They're intelligent pack hunters with millions of years of experience. And they're very, very good at what they do." Park stared at the display, processing what this meant. How many species have they wiped out, based on the genetic material I found in their digestive systems? Dozens, maybe hundreds. They've been doing this since before most current civilizations even existed. The implications were staggering. These weren't just dangerous animals, they were an extinction-level threat that had been systematically removing intelligent life from the galaxy for eons. "Sir," Captain Lee Soo-jin's voice crackled through the comm system. "We're receiving reports from all ground teams. The Vorthok are changing their tactics." Park immediately switched to the tactical channel. "Major Song, report." "Sir, it's the strangest thing. The creatures are no longer attacking our positions directly. They're pulling back, regrouping. It's like they thinking, 'cause they are thinking," Park replied grimly. "They're intelligent. They're trying to figure out how to kill us." But as the hours passed, something unexpected happened. The Vorthok weren't just regrouping, they were retreating. For the first time in their existence, they were running. Away from prey, Captain Lee studied the tactical displays with growing amazement. "Admiral, I'm seeing something that shouldn't be possible. Vorthok are abandoning their hunting grounds. They're moving toward the mountain ranges." "Why?" Park asked. "'Cause they've never encountered anything like us before," Lee replied. "Think about it, sir. They hunt like predators. They rely on fear, surprise, and overwhelming force. But we hunt like humans." Park raised an eyebrow. "Explain. Predators attack when they're hungry and retreat when they're threatened. But humans, we don't just hunt for food. We hunt for revenge. We hunt to protect others. We hunt because something needs to die, and we're going to make sure it happens." The truth of her words became clear as reports came in from across the planet. Human forces weren't just fighting the Vorthok, they were hunting them. When a creature retreated, the humans followed. When one tried to hide, they tracked it down. When it called for help from its pack, they killed the entire pack. "They're experiencing something completely new," Dr. Choi observed. "Fear real. Survival-level fear. For millions of years, they've been the apex predators. Now they're discovering what it feels like to be prey." Major Song's voice came through the CUM system, filled with grim satisfaction. Admiral, we've got movement on the northern continent. The Vorthok are retreating toward the cave systems in the mountain range. All of them. Are they regrouping for a final attack? Park asked. No, sir, Song replied. They're running. For the first time in their existence, the Vorthok are running scared. Park looked at the tactical display showing dozens of red dots moving away from human positions. The most successful predators in galactic history were fleeing like frightened animals. Major Park said quietly, "They're not running to safety. They're running to their deaths. Those caves are going to become their tomb." Copy that, Admiral. Should we pursue? Park looked at Dr. Choi, who was studying the biological samples with renewed interest. Doctor, what happens when a predator species faces extinction? They fight with everything they have, she replied. It's going to be their last stand. Then, we'd better make sure it's their last anything, Park said. Major Song, take your forces into those caves. It's time to finish what these creatures started millions of years ago. The entrance to the cave system looked like the mouth of some giant beast. Dark, jagged rocks formed teeth around an opening that seemed to swallow light itself. Steam rose from the depths, carrying with it the smell of something ancient and wrong. Sergeant Han Baram stood at the edge, checking her equipment one final time. Behind her, 20 of humanity's best soldiers prepared for what might be there. Final mission. Each Marine wore specialized cave fighting gear, night vision goggles, magnetic boots, weapons designed for close-quarters combat. Remember, Han said quietly, we're not just fighting in their territory now. We're fighting in their home. They've been living in these caves for millions of years. They know every tunnel, every passage, every hiding spot. Private Nam Jahoon adjusted his thermal scanner, the device humming softly in the darkness. Sarge, why are we going in there? Can't we just seal the caves and leave them trapped? Han looked at him with the patience of someone who had been teaching young soldiers for years. Because that's not how humans fight, son. We don't leave enemies alive to come back later. We finish what we start. The truth was more complicated than that. Admiral Park had been clear in his orders. The Vorthok couldn't be allowed to survive. These creatures had been wiping out intelligent species for millions of years. If even one escaped, it could start the cycle all over again. Besides, Han added, we've been exploring caves since before we invented fire. These things might be older than us, but we're better at this than they are. The squad began their descent into the mountain. The caves were massive, carved out by geological forces over millions of years. The Vorthok had expanded them, creating a network of tunnels that stretched deep into the planet's core. As they moved deeper, the temperature began to rise. The walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and strange sounds echoed from the darkness ahead. It was like walking through the digestive system of some enormous creature. Contact, whispered Private Nam, his scanner lighting up with heat signatures. 3 large forms, maybe 200 meters ahead. They're not moving. Han held up her hand, signaling the squad to stop. She activated her night vision and peered into the darkness. What she saw made her jaw clench with determination. The Vorthok were waiting for them. 3 of the massive creatures had positioned themselves in a natural choke point, their multiple heads scanning the tunnel behind them. They were setting up an ambush, using their knowledge of the cave system to their advantage. They think they're clever, Han whispered into her CUM system. Trying to funnel us into a kill zone. What's the plan, Sarge? Asked Corporal Lee Eugen, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Han smiled grimly. We do what humans do best. We adapt. She signaled to her team, and they began to move. But instead of advancing down the main tunnel, they split up. Years of training in Earth's most hostile environments had taught them to think like the caves themselves. Private Nam took the left passage, his thermal scanner guiding him through a narrow crack in the wall. Corporal Lee went right, crawling through a space barely wide enough for a human body. Han took the center, but instead of walking, she began to climb. The Vorthok were expecting prey to come to them. They weren't expecting predators to surround them. In position, came Nam's voice through the CUM system. Ready, reported Lee. Han looked down at the 3 creatures from her position on the cave ceiling. They were still watching the main tunnel, completely unaware that death was approaching from 3 different directions. Remember, she whispered, These things have been apex predators for millions of years, but they've never been hunted by something that spent its entire evolution learning how to kill. The attack came from all sides at once. Nam's plasma rifle lit up the left passage, sending superheated rounds into the first Vorthok's side. Lee's position allowed her to target the creature's legs, crippling its ability to move. Han dropped from above, landing directly on the middle creature's back and driving her weapon into what she hoped was its brain. The Vorthok shrieked in pain and confusion. For millions of years, they had been the ones doing the hunting. Now they were experiencing what it felt like to be prey, confused, terrified, and helpless. The battle lasted less than 5 minutes. When it was over, 3 ancient predators lay dead in their own territory, killed by creatures they had never imagined could exist. "That's 3 down," Han reported to command. "How many more are in here?" "Thermal scans show at least 40 more creatures in the deeper tunnels," came the reply. "But they're all moving away from your position. They're running deeper into the mountain." Han looked at her squad. Every face showed the same determination. They'd come here to finish a job, and they weren't leaving until it was done. "Then we follow them," she said simply. "All the way to the bottom if we have to." The hunt continued. Deeper into the darkness, where ancient predators were learning that evolution had finally produced something more dangerous than they were, the explosion could be felt. 300 kilometers away. Deep in the heart of the mountain range, Sergeant Han Boyerm had set her final charges around the last known Vorthok nest. The creatures had retreated to the deepest part of their ancient home, caverns so far underground that it had never seen sunlight. Fire in the hole. Han's voice echoed through the comm system as she and her surviving squad members ran for the exit. The mountain shook like an earthquake as tons of rock collapsed inward. The sound was incredible, a rumbling roar that seemed to go on forever. When it finally stopped, the silence was almost worse than the noise. Admiral Park stood on the surface, watching the mountain range settle into its new shape. Where once there had been 5 peaks, now there were only 3. The other 2 had collapsed into themselves, sealing the ancient cavern system forever. "Status report," Park said into his comm device. "All teams report in," came Major Song's voice. "We've swept the entire continent. No more Vorthok heat signatures detected. They're gone, sir. Every last one of them." Park nodded slowly. Around him, the landscape looked like a war zone. The ground was scarred with blast craters. Entire forests had been burned away. Several small cities had been completely destroyed during the fighting, but the Vorthok were extinct. "Admiral," came a weak voice from behind him, turned to see a group of Zephyrian survivors approaching. They had been hiding in underground bunkers for the past week, waiting for either rescue or death. Their leader was a woman named Zephyra, her blue skin pale from stress and fear. Behind her, maybe 200 other survivors stood in a tight group. They looked at the human soldiers with expressions Park had never seen before, gratitude mixed with terror. "You came," Zephyra whispered, her voice barely audible. "We sent that message into space, and you actually came." Park looked at the small group of survivors. A week ago, this planet had been home to 12 million people. Less than 200,000 remained, scattered across the continents. "In small groups like this one, we told you we would help," Park replied simply, Zephyra's large eyes filled with tears. "But you, you, killed them all. Every single Vorthok on the planet. We thought it was impossible. They've been hunting across the galaxy for millions of years." "Not anymore," Park said. The Zephyrian leader looked around at the destroyed landscape. "The cost was so high. Your ships, your soldiers, Park's jaw tightened. She was right about the cost. Of the nearly 500 ships that had arrived at Kepler-4 for 2B, only 300 were still operational. The rest had been destroyed in the fighting or so badly damaged they couldn't make the journey home. The human casualties were even worse. Almost 40,000 soldiers had died in the caves, fighting creatures that had been perfecting their hunting techniques for millions of years. These weren't just numbers on a report. They were sons and daughters, husbands and wives, friends and comrades. "Was it worth it?" Zephyra asked quietly. Park looked at her and the other survivors. Right. Behind them, children peeked out from behind their parents' legs. They were alive because human soldiers had died in dark tunnels, fighting monsters that nightmares were made of. Yes, he said without hesitation. It was worth it. Captain Lee Sujin approached, her uniform torn and dirty from the fighting. Admiral, we're receiving reports from the other continents. The cleanup is complete. No Vorthok anywhere on the planet. Park nodded. Environmental damage? Severe, sir? The ecosystem will take maybe 2 centuries to fully recover. We had 2. Used some pretty extreme weapons to kill those things. The irony wasn't lost on Park. They had saved the colony by nearly destroying the planet. The Vorthok were gone, but so were most of the forests, many of the rivers, and several mountain ranges. But we're alive, Zephyrus said, as if reading his thoughts. Because of you, we're alive. Our children will grow up in a world without Vorthok. Park looked up at the sky, where the surviving human ships were beginning to form up for the journey. Home. Soon they would return to Earth and report what had happened here. The galaxy would learn that the Vorthok were no longer a threat, but they would also learn something else. They would learn that when humanity went to war, they didn't just fight to win, they fought to eliminate the threat completely.
Ow.
No compromises. No half measures, no survivors. Admiral, came a voice from his comm device. All fleets report ready for departure. Park took one last look at the ruins of what had once been a thriving world. Then let's go home. As the human fleet jumped into hyperspace, they left behind a planet that would remember their visit for centuries to come. The Vorthok were gone forever, but the price of their extinction would be felt for generations. The message arrived at Admiral Park's flagship just as the human fleet was preparing to jump back to Earth. It came through official diplomatic channels. Marked with the seal of the Galactic Council, the same council that had quarantined humanity 50 years ago. Park. Read the transmission in his private quarters, away from the eyes of his crew. The words were carefully chosen, polite and grateful, but he could read between the lines. To Admiral Park Jinwoo and the brave soldiers of Earth, the message began. The Galactic Council extends its deepest gratitude for your swift response to our emergency request. The threat to Kepler-440b has been thoroughly eliminated. The surviving colonists owe their lives to your intervention. Park almost smiled at the word thoroughly. The Council was being diplomatic, but what they really meant was that humanity had completely wiped out a species that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years. Not defeated? Eliminated? The message continued. We are prepared to discuss revised terms for humanity's integration into galactic society. Perhaps it is time to reconsider certain restrictions that have been in place. Park set the message aside and looked out at the stars. The Council was scared. They had asked for help and received something they never expected, a demonstration of what humans were truly capable of when pushed to war. Back on Proxima Station, the Emergency Council session was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from 47 species sat in stunned silence as they reviewed the battle reports from Kepler-440b. Council member Veltar, who had first suggested contacting the humans, stood before the assembly with a mixture of vindication and terror. His face? The Vorthok extinction took exactly 7 days, he reported, his voice shaking slightly. 7 days to eliminate a species that had been the apex predators of the galaxy for millions of years. Representative Morgan, who had opposed contacting the humans, was staring at the holographic displays showing the battle footage. They didn't just fight the Vorthok, they hunted them. They followed them into their own territory and killed every single one. The environmental damage to the planet is severe, added another representative. They used weapons we've never seen before. Things that can collapse entire mountain ranges. Eltar nodded grimly. Thought we understood what humans were. We thought they were just another violent species from a dangerous world. We were wrong. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For decades, the galaxy had viewed humans as primitive warmongers who needed to be contained. But the truth was far more frightening. They're not just survivors, Veltar continued. They're the ultimate predators. They come from a world so hostile that it forged them into something the galaxy has never seen before. They don't just fight to survive. They fight to eliminate threats completely. General Kexaval, who had initially dismissed human capabilities, spoke up with obvious discomfort. The tactical reports are ... disturbing. They didn't just use superior technology, they used strategy, coordination, and a level of ruthlessness that none of our species possess. What are you saying? Asked Representative Yelenara. I'm saying that we've been looking at this wrong, Kexavel replied. We thought the quarantine was to protect the galaxy from them, but maybe it was actually protecting them from us. If they ever decided we were a threat, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the chamber understood. The humans had just demonstrated that they could eliminate any threat, no matter how ancient or powerful. Meanwhile, aboard the U.S. Indomitable, Admiral Park was having his own moment of reflection. The human fleet had accomplished their mission, but at a cost that would be felt for generations. They had saved innocent lives, but they had also revealed something about humanity that couldn't be taken back. Sir, Captain Li Sujin approached quietly. The crew is asking about shore leave when we get home. They want to see their families. Park nodded. Of course, they've earned it. But privately, he wondered what kind of reception they would receive. On Earth, the soldiers who had fought in the caves would carry the memory of those battles forever. They had looked into the darkness and emerged victorious, but not unchanged. Captain Park said quietly, "Do you think we did the right thing?" Lee considered the question carefully. We saved millions of lives, sir. We eliminated a threat that had been terrorizing the galaxy for eons. If that's not right, then nothing is. Park looked out at the stars one more time before the fleet jumped to hyperspace. The galaxy was safer now, but it was also more afraid. Humanity had revealed itself to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined, as the human fleet vanished into hyperspace. Heading home to Earth, they left behind a galaxy that would never look at them the same way again. The quarantine would remain in place, but now it served a different purpose. It wasn't just protecting the galaxy from humanity's violence, it was protecting humanity from the galaxy's growing fear of what they truly were. The age of human isolation was over. The age of human legend had begun.